knows so much, and she's very, probably one of the most knowledgeable, humble people I've come across in our field of honeybees. She's always taken the time to answer our questions. I can't say enough positive things, and she doesn't want me to say a whole lot about it. But with that, Sue Cobey, please give her a warm
Fun to be here, you guys. Thank you for the invitation. If you have questions, or I know there's all different levels of beekeepers here, just interrupt me and take me off on a tangent. How much time do we have?
You have 9. But can everybody hear her?
No. Is that better?
Yeah.
I'm not holding it close enough. Okay. This is real informal, so if you have questions or anything, just wave your hand and we can talk about different things. What I'm going to do is give you an overview of the project I've been working on to bring in germplasm from abroad. And the reason for that is honeybees are not native to this country. And we had a small importation before 1922 of various subsampling of subspecies. And so that's been used to expand and to establish a whole beekeeping industry. So I look at that as kind of my paint box of colors. If I bring more of this in, it gives me more choices. Maybe there's something in there that'll give us a little more edge against Varroa, or just more general, more hardy, more fit. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And there's another personal, selfish reason behind that. I've been working with carniolans, and I follow the Paget law, closed population system. And he gave that a life of 20 years. Okay, I've passed my 20 years, so I wanted something more to augment that. And so that's another reason behind this. So let me see how this get into this. Again, honeybees are not native to the U.S. There's 28 recognized subspecies of honeybees. 28. Right. What I mean by subspecies: Italian, Carniolan, Caucasian, Monacola, whatever it is you're looking at. Pretty interesting. And if you look at the U.S., we basically have 2 here: Italians and Carniolans. And they're pretty much, the U.S. population is pretty mongrelized compared to what you see in Europe. There's areas and countries that specialize in one particular subspecies that they like, and protect that pretty well. So what you're seeing, these were introduced into the US and Australia. Australia has the same kind of genetic bottlenecks. And again, these were brought over by the early colonials on the East Coast, 1600s and through the 1800s. And most of that was Apis mellifera, which is they call it the German black bees. Anybody know these bees, seen these bees?
They were in the movie.
They're dark, they're a bit scrappy, and they weren't really well favored. And then in the mid 1800s, they brought over Italian bees, Ligustica. They're more pretty, they're more gentle, so they were the preferred bee to introduce. And they also brought over Carniolans and Caucasian bees. These are both dark, winter hardy races. They're much better adapted to this area. I chose the Carniolan to work with because I thought it was going to be something unique, something kind of different. And I've become, since then, the people that know me, pretty obsessed with it. So the Honeybee Act in 1922, it closed the border, and this was to prevent the introduction of tracheomites, which we were fairly successful for quite a while. But it did really limit the genetic background of what we can do. And since that time, we've had a couple of bottlenecks. The introduction of tracheomites, varromites, colony collapse disorder. Each one of those takes a bite into that genetic diversity. We've lost pretty much our feral bee population. Before varromite came, we had a pretty good feral bee population across the US. And that was, the commercial producers kind of depended on that. They didn't really worry about raising drones. Now raising drones is probably their most difficult job for those queens to mate with. There's a survey WSU did in the mid 1900s, and then they repeated that 10 years later, and we're repeating it again now, but they showed there's a 25% loss of alleles. That's kind of a different genes, different alleles are different forms of genes, and it's just a statement on the genetic diversity in those populations. 25% loss over a 10-year period, that's huge, really huge. But they also saw a 10% gain in there, which we can attribute to the introduction of Russian bees by USDA, Africanized bees, and also the Australian packaged bees that they brought in for a few years. So, not so sure any of that is a good replacement. And if you look at, since CCD, whatever that is, about 2006, we've had winter losses of about 30%. Fluctuate a little bit, but 30% loss of your livestock is just not sustainable. It's not acceptable. If those were cows in the field, it'd be way more noticeable. But that needs to change. So you have these bottlenecks. Basically, you have this small founding population, which we brought in before that 1922 Act restricted importation. You've got a basic loss of the feral population due to parasitic mites. And then we have this small cottage industry that is responsible for raising our queens. And they're very good at what they do, but they're going to select out what they like, which means you have another loss of diversity in that. So basically the industry raises about 2 million queens, 1.5 million queens annually. And those are raised off of 400 to 500 queen mothers. That's a pretty small population. So you have this narrowing of the gene pool. We're not done yet. Tropicolaps, has anybody ever heard that? This is another parasitic mite, Asian mite. Probably she'll replace Varroa. It's going to be that strong. I hope that doesn't happen here. You also have Capensis. This is the Cape bee. It reproduces parthenogenically. It's actually threatening the African bees in South Africa right now, which is bizarre. So you have these worker bees that reproduce parthenogenically, and they go into African hives and take over, and there's kind of an anarchy because no one's taking care of the brood or foraging. It's kind of a strange situation. You've also got all these different viruses, bacteria, pathogens. These are in a constant state of change. So, and it just kind of compounds everything else. So, Africanized bee, you really have to admire their survivability, the dominance of this bee. Look at these traits. Individually, they're not a lot, but you put all these traits together, and it just gives her an incredible fitness. If you put two virgins together, the African virgin will win the fight. Even in the sperm production, if that queen mates with African drones and European drones, for some reason, I don't know exactly why, but she's going to store more sperm from the African drones in her spermatheca. And she has the ability to maintain her characteristics, but at the same time, she's kind of stealing these traits from our European bees, like wintering ability. It's pretty impressive. These are really impressive bees. And there's a lot of variation between them. Some of them they're nervous, they're fairly defensive, but there's a lot of variation within them. We're having trouble in Southern California right now because the hobbyists are catching swarms, and when these are in a swarm state, they're not defensive, they don't have anything to protect. You put that in the backyard, it builds up into this big colony, and they're afraid to go back there anymore because they turn into a vicious, very defensive colony. So this is one to watch. We haven't talked about, pardon me?
What do you mean by social parasite?
Oh, this is interesting. I'll tell a little story. I have a friend, Marco, in Mexico, a very good beekeeper. He had all his cell builders. They're like 4 colonies high, big, strong, beefy colonies. He keeps like a African-European hybrid. And it's very attractive to the migrating African bees. It's a tropical bee, it migrates. So you get these little fistful swarms coming in. They sit on the side of the colony. The workers go in there, kill the queen, and then the African queen goes in there and takes over the colony. That's social parasitism. Yeah, they just take over. You have a little tiny cluster taking over this big, strong colony. So his son, we're out there drinking beer or something in his backyard, and you have to understand, these are partially Africanized bees. He's got at least 9 or 10. But there were toys all between the colonies. And his 12-year-old son comes out with his torch and starts blowing the torch against the colony on the board. Marco, ¿qué pasó? And he was just trying to kill these little invading swarms that are coming into these colonies every night. That was his job. Well, maybe an extreme reaction to that, but.
You want to hold the microphone right in front of your mouth.
Okay, is that better?
You're waving it around, and so you're louder than you're going.
I just have to clip on here and okay, just wave your hand and yell at me or something. So we have a lot of challenges. This is a big one, malnutrition. If bees are healthy and have good nutrition, and I don't think we really understand what that is. We know pollen and nectar, yes, but bees need lots of different types of pollen. Different pollens have different amino acids, so this is a really critical thing. We give them these huge monocultures. We keep building cities on top of all our land, so the bees are compromised if they don't have good nutrition. That's going to make them more vulnerable to pests and diseases. We have all these. We're getting much better at our pest control. We now have like the neonics, the imidacloprids. We have a pesticide that's very safe for mammals, but it is very toxic to insects. And I don't know how you separate that from honeybees. So when they're in pollination, they're exposed to all these things, these sublethal effects. It doesn't outright kill them, but it has a lot of strange things. You have this chemical ecology that is the communication inside a hive. So the bees are confused. They have developmental problems. You'll see the brood developing at different rates. You don't have a nice solid brood pattern in there. You have bees that get lost. They can't find their way home. Communication problems, learning behavior problems. There's just a whole bunch of these little things. Again, if you take this list one at a time, it's okay, but you put them together, and it's really pretty devastating for the bees. I don't know how to explain it more than, you look in a hive and you just see, it just doesn't have any vigor. It's just kind of sitting there. It won't grow. It's just I don't know. Then you have this load of pathogens. We're not dealing with one or two. You have a really toxic environment that these bees are living in. The wax is lymphophilic. It has, it absorbs all these chemicals and maintains the pathogens. Question?
The previous slide said something about morality.
Oh, it's supposed to be mortality. Sorry. my brain was thinking something else. Anyway, yeah, that was mortality. Sorry, I didn't change it. Good eye. But again, you have all these different pathogens are coexisting and interacting, and you get synergistic effects between the chemical residues, the pathogens, malnutrition. Those three things, you put those three factors together, that's what I call CCD. It's a phenomenon. I sometimes wonder how these can even exist today. So there's been lots of studies showing that the more diversity you have within the population of bees, within the hive, which means how many different drones she's mated with, the more fit the bees are. There's been lots of studies showing this. And look at all the different tasks they do. They have to get through the winter, they have to make a good living. All these things, swarm, reproduce, and that takes a lot of diversity. Even the way the queens mate. Those queens are mating in flight. That's a pretty risky business. They're mating in flight. They're vulnerable to predators, dragonflies, birds, whatever's out there. And they're not mating with one drone, they're mating with 10 to 20 different drones. The whole strategy is outcrossing bees. she's looking at, even when she leaves the hive, she'll fly low and then she raises up to these drone congregating areas. So she can have a lot of diversity. They've clocked queens that were made with as many as 60 drones. Can you imagine that? 60? It's just phenomenal. So what happens is, what you're looking at here, this is the abdomen of a drone, and this is the queen. She's got this is the oviducts here. So she collects that huge amount of semen, and it kind of mixes in there, about 48 hours, and then she'll take 10% of that, 10%, very wasteful, very inefficient, and store it. But she's taking a little bit from every drone she mates with. So if you look at a colony, if each of those drones represents a different subfamily of worker bees, all of those will be represented in the colony all the time. The ratio may change, you may have more of one than the other, but that whole thing is a mechanism of seeking genetic diversity. That keeps her fit, keeps her strong. What you're looking at here is, this is the spermatheca, the sperm storage organ. That's a full spermatheca and a virgin. This looks like a diamond. It's really pretty, just crystal clear. Every time I pinch a queen, I'll look at her spermatheca. It just gives me an idea how well mated she was. Or if you're buying queens from California, the weather's been bad, or if you're raising queens and you're not sure how well mated they are, it's a nice little field test. The spermatheca is, it has a tracheal net. It's a rough white net around it. It feeds oxygen. It also has a bunch of accessory glands providing nutrients. I don't know how she keeps that sperm alive for years, but that's one thing we'd really like to know, figure out. Again, it's amazing, the whole strategy of how they mate. Really amazing. This is the best selection tool. She does it herself the best. You just want to promote it, you just want to push it in a direction. You're facing a lot of changes with different plants, different climates, things are always changing. The pressure from diseases and pests, you want that association. If you completely eliminate all that, I think that's kind of what we did with Varroa, the intolerance of Varroa. So we keep putting on this arsenal of chemicals until we've raised a super mite that is resistant to our chemical arsenal. Now, what are we going to do now? Not too effective. So I think if we just let all this go and just took those big losses early on, we'd be way better up. If you look at what happened with trachea mites, it was pretty devastating initially, then things kind of filtered out. Trachea mites really aren't a problem. Varroa's a different story. It jumps species. It's, I don't know, I compare it to getting AIDS. It's a pretty tough cookie. But I think it's possible to get closer to it. So looking at this diversity, I'm just going to go through I just want to pin down that point. This is a bunch of studies where they did, they took a queen and made her to a single drone. Question? Okay. And then they took a queen and made it to a mix of semen from 10 or 15 different drones, and they gave them the same amount of semen. They took a subset of this and gave it 1 microliter of semen versus the single drone 1 microliter. And then they compared those two. They put them out in the field and did different studies with them. This is from Tom Seeley, What they did is, Tom Seeley works in the forest. He works with just natural bees. He puts them out there and just observes them. They're wonderful scientists. So he did this with swarms. So you've got a swarm headed by a single drone inseminated queen, and then another swarm headed by multiple inseminated. And the queen with the multiple insemination, she found a nest site faster, she produced more food, she swarmed, she wintered well. I mean, she survived the winter. A single drone inseminated queen died out pretty quickly. It just couldn't handle that harsh environment. So, big difference. Christian Grosinger's lab looked at single drone queen versus multiple mated queens, and she found that the multiple mated queens they're more attractive, they're getting more attention, they're better fed. Their pheromone bouquet is just signaling, hey, I am well mated, I am worthy, don't supersede me, that kind of thing. So the bees know, they know that queen is constantly showing her reproductive status to the hive. That's so critical for them. There's a series of studies by David Tarpey and Tom Seeley that looked at different diseases that like chalk brood, and they looked at foul brood and found that the single drone inseminated queens always broke down, whereas the multiple inseminated queens would, it just gives them an edge. There may be one subfamily in there that has better hygienic behavior, one that has a physiological resistance to American foul brood or whatever. Just all those things add together, it just gives them enough fitness to survive and keep going, given the different predators and parasites. Even thermoregulation. If it's that hot, dry summer California, they have to collect water, they have to ventilate that hive, keep it cool. Same thing in winter. When you get that really cold, couple of cold snaps, if you have bees that, with a single drone insemination, the temperatures fluctuate wildly. They can't regulate it as well, but the multiple inseminated queens, they seem to keep it, have a threshold level that's very even. So, lots of different factors. Even in the communication, we know that bees, different subspecies have slightly different language, dance language. Like the carnies will communicate a further distant source versus Italians, things like this. So, but they seem to understand each other. This was surprising. I thought there would be some confusion in there, but it seems to, they seem to do fine and understand each other, and that works to be more efficient in collecting their food. Better division of labor. If you look at division of labor, we have the age thing. We have the young bees inside the hive, nurse bees. They age, the foragers, defense, undertakers, whatever they do. But there also, you have these different subfamilies that will be specialists. You have some that will specialize in pollen collection, and they'll stay in that state a little bit longer. It's also very dynamic. It's like, for example, if you do something, something happens, that the bees have to change quickly. Say you just pick up a hive and you move it. You've lost all, in the middle of the day, you lost the field force. So those young nurse bees, they're gonna have to change. They're gonna have to, you'll have a subset of those that will go out and start foraging much earlier to compensate for that change. Really dynamic. So the more diversity you have in there, the more jobs they take on, the better fit they're gonna be. Oh, this is a funny one too. She showed that if you look at the microbes the bees put into making the bee bread, this is really critical for them. So the bees, the colonies with single drone inseminated queens had less microbe diversity versus the multiple mated queens. I'm not quite sure how that works out, but it just showed that this bacteria, the gut bacteria, the helpful bacteria, was really good. And this could play a big role in things like nosema. So that's important. Okay, selecting bees is a tough thing because you're looking at behavioral traits. And these behavioral traits, they're in a constant state of change. And you have the environment, which plays a huge role in how that is expressed. So we know that bees have few genes for immunity to detoxify or to deal with all these pathogens and things like that. They have a lot of behavior, things like we know that hygienic behavior is the ability to have really sensitive olfactory or smelling, and they can detect that there's a parasite or pathogen in the brood, and they will remove that. So, propolis. Why would you collect sap from trees? It has no food value, but this is a natural self-medication that they collect. And we now know that if you take a colony in the woods, they'll, like a trunk of a tree, they'll just polish this with propolis. If you give bees rough-cut boards, they'll propolize it versus our nice smooth milled wood boxes. It's hard for them to work that, but it's, I think this is something we've kind of pushed away from. I know I've selected against that because in the summer it's like chewing gum, but I'm changing my tune a little bit. So Now I just put baby oil on my hands and put up with it. I'll talk about these Caucasian bees. They're really good propolis collectors. So what we're doing is we're bringing in semen. Semen's fairly safe. I'm not bringing in live bees. There's too many pathogens, parasites, all kinds of things out there. We do know that viruses will travel in semen. That's one risk we take. So we have a quarantine station in Pullman. It's an ecological reserve. It's basically wheat fields, not very bee friendly out there. So we bring the semen in, and and this is made into domestic queens, and then we back cross it a couple times to make it more pure. So our goal is just enhancing genetic diversity in the U.S. gene pool. And when you bring something like this in, it is a bit of a wild card. I don't know how compatible it's going to be with what we have here, or even if the beekeepers will like what it is. Because we initially brought in 7 or 8 subspecies into the U.S. We ended up with 2, Italian Carniolan. We had the Caucasians here for a short time, but I think because of the propolis, they became ill-favored, and we're bringing those back now. It's really quite a pretty bee. I'm really focused on the dark races, so you have to excuse me for that. This is our quarantine station, so we bring this in. We brought in Italian bees from Italy, Carnica from Germany and Slovenia, and the Caucasian bees from Republic of Georgia. This quarantine station is it's under APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, something like that. But when they tell us when they can release this, they take a subset of the semen and check it for viruses, and then we observe for any strange, I don't know, you're looking for any disease behavior, anything that would be odd. So they sit in there for about 6 to 8 months. Initially, we went to Italy to bring in some Italian stock. It's interesting, in this country, they don't select for color. I think we've over-selected color in this country. I mean, you want a nice, pretty yellow Italian, or if you want Carniolan, you want a really nice black bee. I think I'm guilty of it too. My bees tend to be darker than the Carniolan I've seen in Germany and Slovenia. But I don't know, it's a good marketing tool, I guess. But that was it. That was very interesting. In these countries, they have institutes that are dedicated to maintaining honeybee stocks. In Italy, they have a central institute, and they work very closely with the queen producers, and they trade stock and help them select, which is pretty. This is a retired professor here. He was our interpreter and went around with us to the different stocks. So here we're collecting drones. We put these excluder cages over the top so we could get a lot of drones. Beautiful country, excellent food. Yeah, this is the institute in Italy, in Reggio Emilia. So they had like 12 different lines of these different Italian bees from the different commercial producers. So they kind of join, have a membership, they pay into it, and then they pick out their best, and the institute takes that stock and evaluates it, propagates it, and so it's rolling back and forth over time. Carniolan, I've worked with this bee since the early 80s. It has a different production strategy than the Italian bees. It's just, I think it's a lot more in tune to the environment. So we went to, we brought some stock in from Germany and also Slovenia. This is an interesting country. Beekeeping is a very prestigious job, or profession over there. Very traditional. Every town has several honey stores, and the beekeepers, they might have 200 or 300 colonies, and they'll make a very good living on that. They sell wax, they sell liqueurs, they sell honey, all kinds of different products. There's usually several museums in the countryside. whole villages would just be really devoted to that. So very interesting. They only have Carnica. Carnica is native here. They're a little concerned with the World Trade Agreements that they might have to open those borders. Right? No, I think they just officially kept it lobbied to keep it closed or something like that. But there's no bees are introduced into Slovenia. Or not supposed to be introduced. This is a mating yard. There's 2 queen producers that own this house. These are the breeders up in the top here, and there's it's up in the hills, and they can spend the night up there, grab queens or do whatever they want. This is their mating nooks. There's a resident bear, so they cage them. You can see some more traps back here. This is the official smoker. You'll see these strips of these cardboard things in all the bee shops. That's the most protective gear I wore in that whole country, the whole trip. I never put on a veil in that country. We looked at a lot of bees. That's how gentle they are. Really nice bees. So he set up in the corner of his little shop office place. He was bringing me, these are cages of drones and collecting the semen. Again, very traditional. They have these bee houses. So each one of these is a beehive, and they put these, they paint these pictures. They're folkloric, they're religious, they all have a story, and they're very proud of these. Really, really fun place. So this is inside the bee house, and these frames, you can pull them out like, they slide on a couple of like wire dowels or something, but they're really easy. They're not stuck together, and some of these are like 100 years old. They're just very well kept, very well made, traditional beekeeping. And in the corner here again, we set up, brought out my little flight box and collected semen. So here we're pulling out frames and picking out the drones in that corner. Georgia. This place was a little more difficult to get around. We went up toward the Black Sea on the Russian border. Beautiful country, absolutely beautiful country. Just hard to get around. These towers here, they would shoot arrows at the Russians. You can look at the history. They use these jumbo hives. They had just harvested the honey, so they're small right now, but they're huge frames. Pretty cumbersome to work with. This was late season. I don't know if I have, well, maybe I have later. Again, this bee is noted for the propolis collection. This is in my backyard. I had one, and I have screen bottoms on everything, so she just glued all the frames on the bottom box together. So much for my screen bottoms. And they collect the propolis on their legs. They usually ask for some help to get that off. But we know that this really quiets the immune system. It suppresses the viruses and bacteria. And it's, we're learning a lot more about this. It has a lot of value. This is the road to getting up to the Mestia. It's a little village up on where I showed you those pictures. It was tough getting up. It was scary getting up there. You'd have these roads, and it was wet, and it just went straight down. So halfway up, they were really glad to see this backhoe because that took a couple extra hours to get through. And there's only one way up there, pushing a fly. And that wasn't the traffic. They would sit in the road because it's warm.
Oh.
You know, and the few places we stopped, you fence your garden. The animals are run-free. So it just felt like going back in time, and the people were so wonderful. Branded, I'll talk about this a little bit later, he was cryopreserving the semen. He needed a fresh egg that hadn't been put in the refrigerator. So that was easy to find, and people were just so kind of intrigued with what we're doing. It's fun. This is just along the roadside. It's pretty rough, very mountainous country, so they just put the bees next to the road. And the beekeepers will just camp out during the honey flow, take care of them. This is a priest. We just kind of ran into him. We were driving along, we saw beehives and some people out there, so we stopped to talk. Our translator is here. And he's a priest that owns the bees, and he takes care of the beekeepers that take care of his bees. But he was very proud to show us. We weren't sure, a little bit shy going in there, we don't know. But he was very friendly. He said, "Oh yes, come back and get the drones." And this was kind of late season. They kicked these drones out really fast. I was surprised. I mean, even within about a week, the stock I have in my house, they're kicking out the drones just really fast. So we were pretty lucky in terms of, oh here, you can see this, you've seen this in Asia. But when they decide the season is over, it is over. I wasn't quite ready for them to do that, but they did. So another scene of that area. Here's a typical Caucasian drone. They're very black bee, really quite elegant. Oh, this last year we went back to Italy. The initial stock we brought in tended to be a little dark, a little defensive. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to it because I wasn't real excited about Italian. So we gave this to Jackie Park. Do you know the Park family, Park Italian? They're pretty much famous for their Park Italians. Park. Anyway, so we gave this to Jackie, and she said, "Oh, well, I should take my stock over there." So I thought, "Oh, geez, this is not going well." So I said, "You come pick it out." So we took Jackie with us. This was our first trip to Europe, so we had to do a little sightseeing and shopping for Jackie. We went to the museum. Jackie went shopping. Anyway, this is in Bologna. This is where most of the queen producers there. Faustio is president of the Beekeepers Association. He said he's exhausted catching drones because I wanted more drones. And so I was picking up the scene when these guys were just sitting around drinking beer and talking most of the time. Anyway, but it was a beautiful, beautiful place. So, we're sending notes back home. We love Lacustica. We love Italian bees. I was real excited about that. Actually, these two guys are coming over here the first week of April. Faustio and Emilio. It's kind of fun. This is their mating area, the mating yard. Kind of going back in the woods, and they had those queens were beautiful. They really were pretty queens, huge queens. So we did find some that Jackie liked a lot. These are some pictures of the breeders. The guy that did this, it takes him 3 years to evaluate his breeding stock, which that was impressive. He follows them for that long, and then he wants her to live long enough to be very productive in making lots of queens. And traditionally in the U.S., we change them every year. A lot of the guys just go out in the almonds and do their selection out there, pick out the best quality. So that was kind of interesting for Jackie to see. This is his apiary. I don't know if you can read that date. 1878 is when it was started by his family. Very old traditional beekeeping. And again, they have the bee houses in here. You can walk in the back and open the top. Actually, I really like one of those considering the weather we have here. You should get in there and raft and do stuff, huh? Anyway, yeah, very traditional beekeeping. So this is a colony that Jackie really favored. Really nice, bright yellow Italian. What they do is, this is their mite control. They cage the queen and get a broodless period, and then they treat it with salicylic acid. That's why they're fairly safe. This is again the Institute in Reggio Emilia. Cecilia, she's in charge of the evaluation for the Italian stock for the country, so she was a really big help for us. And they have lots of the different lines there that we could look at. It was great for Jackie to see that and select out what she liked. So these are some of the colonies, Jackie and Steve Shepard. Looking at these.
Do they do a lot of IA there, or they?
The Institute does,
Okay.
but among the beekeepers,
Okay.
the only country that does a whole lot of that is Poland. And that's because of Wojcik. I don't know if you know that name, but he's one of the early founders of the technique. Really promoted it there. But no, it's not a common practice. Again, these are some of the drone mothers with the big drone traps on the front. And this is the process of collecting the semen. The only function of the drone is to mate, so just by handling, sometimes if they're mature, they just avert. The endophallus turns inside out. It's a really strange structure. But the semen is kind of a creamy coffee au lait color. And then it sits on a bed of mucus, so that's just collected into a syringe and then ejected into the queen. Brandon Hopkins, this is really exciting. If you look at one of the missions of USDA is germplasm preservation. We do this with plants and all kinds of mammals, cows and chickens and stuff like this. We haven't had this capability with honeybees until now, until Brandon figured out some of this stuff. So what he's doing here is putting semen into liquid nitrogen. The first time we took him, I was pretty protective of the semen I collected. I wanted to take it home and use it. And it's amazing. You can hold semen, honeybee semen, at room temperature for several weeks. Several weeks compared to mammals, which is about 48 hours. So I gave Brandon the stock that I wasn't that as much interested in, but anyway, now I'm real excited because we've taken some of the semen out of the liquid nitrogen tank and made some really pretty queens. Again, this goes in, we screen it for viruses, then we put it out in, made it to domestic queens, follow them, look how they're building up, look for anything unusual, disease, pest, or any kind of pathogens, things like that. And then they're released. Once they're released, I graft off of those, and then I cross them another time and give them to the California queen producers. These guys are really important. There's no way I can get that stock out to the public without their input. And these guys are really proud of what they produce. So I have to prove to them that I can enhance their stock, improve their stock in some way. So this has been a really valuable. So they'll send me virgins from the best of their stock, and we'll make those crosses, Carniolans or Italians or whatever they are. Really critical. I love this picture because it's 4 guys grafting. This is kind of a traditionally woman's job, I guess. You have more dexterity with your fingers and stuff, but of course Shannon's in the back there just talking. But yeah, that's Park family. This is Strachan's. They do the grafting a little bit different. This is Conan, Bill Conan. They have kind of an assembly line of making up the nukes. You've got somebody putting a cup of bees, a queen cell, syrup, and then they go into a cold room for about 48 hours. Yeah, they go to this cold room and just sit there with like a swamp cooler, heavy fans in there. And that, if you put them out in the field, the bees will just abscond, but once they get familiar, once the virgin emerges from the queen cell, it becomes a tight unit, and then they can release it. Is that one I missed? Yeah, queen production. It seems brutal sometimes, but they're shaking packages. A bunch of queens on the table there. to be able to raise these queens for a full season and get good quality is quite an art. These guys are good. I go down to Conan's in May, and we just do this massive insemination. We're trying to get it set up so they're going to graft off the queens they like the best, incorporating that. Sometimes I'll bring semen down with them. Sometimes I get BSH semen from USDA, and we'll kind of mix that in there a little bit. Depends what they want, a combination. So then I give them 20, 30 inseminated queens each, and then they go through those and choose what they like. I'm trying to get them to be a little more self-sufficient in that, instead of trying to maintain all that stuff myself. I can do one population, but two is going to be a lot. Yes?
What percentages are you having now? What percentages are you having with your defrosting? I know that they were fairly low when you started, and that Brendan's technique was changing and they were coming up. So where are you now with the imports?
It varies a bit when you take the semen out of the tank. It's between, we've got a few that were up at 90% viability. I think the average is more like 70%. There is some damage in the storage of sperm. The sperm tails are really long, and if you put it into saline solution, you have good viability, which is what we assume was fertility, but it's not exactly fertility. There's something else going on there. So you will get kind of a spotty root pattern on some of the queens, but there's variation there. We haven't quite figured out why that is, and it can be from the same tube of semen. But no, I mean, that's enough to get a graft off of that queen and get her laying. I don't know if I would trust to give that to the beekeepers just yet. So I give them daughters off of that. But
That's huge.
It's
From what
huge.
you started with.
That saves me a trip abroad. It saves me, we can back cross that a couple generations out of the tank. So it's a huge undertaking. So this is Brandon doing his magic. Doesn't look too spectacular, but we've been in hotel rooms where you have this liquid nitrogen running down the whole yeah. I should put something shorter like that. Because it's a process. It takes a lot of time. You could stay up all night fussing with this, getting the timing just right. So it's the freezing process and the thawing process. It's very critical. It doesn't matter the duration of time. You can keep it in there 6 months, or you can keep it in there 100 years. It's the same. It's just a matter of the freezing and thawing is the critical part. So we have the world's first germplasm repository. We're little right now, but there is a lot of interest worldwide. We're getting a lot of inquiries from all over the world. There's a lot of different ecotypes of bees in isolated places, and they're under a lot of pressure just from development, just from the movement of bees around. A lot that we want to try to preserve and maintain. And just looking at stock maintenance, instead of having to keep that whole population of honeybees every year and make it every year, I can just have a tank to store it in and recreate it from there. So. That's fine. I'm almost done. So these are the straws of semen. Inseminate the queen, and she's good to go. You could do crazy things like do selection across time. So say you have a favorite queen, we can put her in the tank and then give that to your granddaughter. Is that awesome? Right?
Microphone, if it is a
Oh, okay. I was just saying that you can do selection across time because of that capability we have. So this has been a real team effort by a lot of different people. We got a lot of good funding. Costco funded some of the germplasm repository. They're very concerned about honeybees. They have a lot of products that depend on honeybee pollination. So, yeah, very thankful for them. California Beekeepers, American Honey Producers, American Beekeeping Federation, a lot of people contributed to this. look at this list of beekeepers. All these people have donated virgin queens or support or taking care of things, support in different ways. Cooperators, I reached out to a lot of different people. Initially I was at Davis, reached out to Steve Shepard to help me get that border open. It took me 20 years to get that first tube seat. Tough. Judy Chen, she does the virus testing. Michelle Flanagan, she was a postdoc working out of Davis. She's now at University of Montana. Wallace Vivek, we've got the California Tech Transfer Team helping us do some of the evaluations. When I was at Davis, I had a couple of these visiting scholars that were just awesome. Elizabeth Frost, she's now with the tech team, California Tech Team. Actually, she just got back from Australia, working with bees over there. Brian was just a local beekeeper volunteer. Tylen Selby, beekeeper's son. Student at UC Davis, of course, I grabbed him as soon as I could. And this is Jacob from Poland. He was one of the visiting professors. We do our little annual bee beard thing. Just a lot of fun. This is Tylen and Elizabeth. Once you get into this, easy to jump out of it. But it is a pretty unique experience. It's amazing how much heat they can produce, and those little tarsi are itchy.
So does anybody have questions for Sue? I'm going to bring the mic to you so everybody can hear your question. Yeah. I'll get my exercise.
Yeah, I was wondering how they medicate, especially like in those trailers where they have controllers come out. First question. Second question is.
What was the first question? How
First
they
question
medicate
is-
in the
How do
bee
they
house?
medicate? Do they medicate?
In the bee houses.
Do they medicate or?
How do they
Oh,
medicate?
yeah.
Or
Yeah,
do they?
Varroa is always the issue. Yes, everywhere. So how do they?
Do they do it the same way we do?
They like those bee houses?
Yeah.
Yeah, they treat everything at the same time. Yeah. What? A little more formal.
With the strips?
They use different things. I mean, most of them were using the acrylic acid over there at the time. They
And with
tried to use-
your pure strain, like your Italians, different countries, are they worried about, like we've had the Africanized bees come up? Are they worried about getting different species of bees to contaminate your pure
Yeah.
strains?
Yeah, they are, especially a country like Slovenia where they're native. But with the World Trade Agreements, they have free movement of bees. But, and the beekeepers are quite, I don't know, they argue, they get very upset. In Germany, you have the Carnica, and you have the Buckfast breeders up there, and they clash heads because they're very territorial in their mating. They have like mating stations that they want to keep as pure as possible. So big controversy there. And the beekeepers are they love their whatever they're working on, whatever subspecies they're working on. It's not much. It's not like the U.S. where everything's kind of mixed up. Very different. And the institutes are dedicated to one subspecies generally. So it's very different field. Any more questions?
Okay, the first 5 queens, how long you guys been working with?
What's that?
Of the queens that you guys have bred with all the different breeds, you know?
Yeah, we started this, I got my first batch in '06 in Ohio when the Australian packages were coming in, or '07, I guess it was. And then I hooked up with Steve Shepard in '08 and we started bringing in, and we brought in stock every year since then. So yeah.
Have they improved like the longevity of the bees or?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because we have a lot of anecdotal reports about beekeepers really notice a difference or really like something like that. But we haven't really done a good comparison study. We're going to start looking at that more now, mostly looking at the different characteristics of different subspecies. For example, like the dark races they fly in more marginal weather, and I think they're going to be a better pollinator for almonds because they'll tolerate that, really cold. But then you have Italians that are kind of bred for packaged meat production, which come up, really rooty. So it depends what you want, but just kind of define those different characteristics. But I'm not going to tell you we have rower resistance. I hope we get there, but not quite.
I'm wondering about the survival rates that they have, for instance, in Slovenia, when they really take care of not letting anyone in. It seems they should have a genetic diversity problem too. So how do they fare?
Yeah, I think if you look at the diversity initially there, I mean, it's native there, it's a big country. So, I don't know, it's a good question. I don't know how diverse that is. I don't know if anyone's ever really looked at that diversity. That's an interesting question. If you look at like Carnica in Germany, which was introduced and has displaced mellifera, I think they may have some bottlenecks there. But we have a student, Megan Taylor, she's looking at how diverse the stuff we've brought in is from the U.S. population. And it's definitely increased the number of alleles in our population. It's definitely increased the diversity of our U.S. population.
What are you going to use as several measures of success of what you're doing? It can't just be Varroa resistance.
No, it's just general fitness. I mean, just general fitness, production levels, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, the breeders have really noticed a difference, and their customers have, but there's not a real good measure of that.
Any other questions for Sue? Oh, back there, I'm coming. Bam.
So, what breeders are offering stock that might contain the extra genetic?
If you order newborn carniolan, that stock has been pretty well incorporated into it, so you'll get a splash of the German and the Slovenian in there. The Caucasian I just released this fall. Pat Heikem has it. Valerie Strachan Apiaries has it. And also I just sent a couple to Leonard Pankratz. So those three producers.
Will those be available here?
Yeah, they should be available this spring.
All right.
Any other questions for Sue? No?
Yes. How many people use cardiolans in here?
We win. Do you feel love?
Yay. Question over here?
What's the easiest way to find out about classes at Azu this year?
The WSU website will list those. I can remember. I think it's like the first week of August. And there's one in Pullman, and then the second one is in Mount Vernon. But yeah, you guys can raise queens. This is the most fun part of beekeeping and the most rewarding. And you can pick out what you like. So I encourage everybody, even if you got 2 hives in the backyard, just, you can raise on whatever scale you want. You can raise just a few, or you can raise a whole bunch. If you have extras, pass them around. It's really a fun. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.